Hello, everyone. Welcome to Deloitte's Debriefs Tax Webcast series in Asia Pacific. Our webcast today is from our Indirect Tax series and it is titled Malaysia Indirect Tax Special Voluntary Disclosure Program, Special Voluntary Disclosure and Amnesty Program. My name is Sender Nilalingam and I'm an indirect tax partner with Deloitte Malaysia. I have the pleasure of hosting today's webcast. I have two speakers with me today, Tan Eng Yu and Larry James Da Maria. Eng Yu is the Indirect Tax and Global Trade Leader for Deloitte Malaysia. Larry James is a Tax Director with Deloitte Malaysia. You may access our bios on the left side of the screen. Before I introduce the agenda for today's webcast, I'd like to take a moment to highlight some of the features of our webcast console. First, all users are on listen-only mode. If you have any content-related questions, you can submit at any time in the Q&A box at the bottom right of the screen. We'll do our best to respond to your questions during the presentation. Second, all PC users can maximize or minimize each box at your convenience during the webcast. You may also explore the icons at the bottom of the screen. If you want to download today's slides and related publications, please go to the Downloads and Links box. On the other hand, mobile device users can view the slides and answer the survey on the screen. Thirdly, if you require an attendance record for this event, you can download your CPE certificate by clicking the Request CPE icon at the bottom of the webcast console. Okay, with that, we can move on to the agenda then. So let me give you an overview of the topics we will discuss. Firstly, we'll touch on the current state of play in Malaysia. Then we will sort of move on to an introduction to the VA program. And then we'll touch on the key features and we will close off with what you can do next. At the end of the session, if time permits, we will have a session on for Q&A where we can answer some of your questions that you are submitted on air. So with that, we can move on to the first bit, which is the current state of play. So before we actually talk about the details, I thought I'd give everyone just a very quick overview as to what the situation is in Malaysia right now in terms of indirect tax. Now, as many of you know, Malaysia had a brief flirtation with GST, but it was introduced in 2015 but abolished in 2018, and we saw a return to the service tax and sales tax system in that same year of 2018. What we've seen since then is there's been significant reforms to both of those taxes, which have been aimed at really broadening the scope. Now, what this has achieved is it's brought in some additional revenue for the government, but what the tax that they've collected has still fallen well short of what the GST had brought in those few years that the GST was in existence. In addition to this, what we've seen as a consequence of the pandemic, the government has been forced to sort of give a number of concessions aimed at sort of encouraging or promoting industries that have been badly impacted. That, coupled with reduced economic activity over those few years, has seen quite a large reduction in the indirect tax revenue that has been collected and has impacted the government's fiscal position in terms of tax collection. Now, this has led to some speculation that we may see a return of GST to Malaysia. That being said, we are possibly looking at an election sometime in the next sort of 12 to 18 months. And so in that sense, it's highly unlikely that we'd see any major tax reforms being announced prior to that election occurring. As a consequence, what this voluntary disclosure program is seen by many, including in the government, is that it is a way to address this shortfall issue in tax revenue. And the expectation is that participation will be pushed very hard by the authorities. And, to some extent, we're already seeing indications of that, and I think my colleagues will get into that in a bit more detail. Another trend that we've seen is we've not seen many sales tax or service tax audits since the reintroduction of both of those taxes, with the major focus of customs being on closing out the GST. However, what we're now seeing are signs that there will be a wide-scale audit program launched once this voluntary disclosure program concludes later this year. Either we're going to see that audit program happen soon after, or even perhaps much earlier, depending on what we kind of see happens in terms of revenue that's collected. Now, with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Eng Yu, who's going to talk about some of the specific details. Eng Yu?
Okay. Thanks very much, Dan. Well, good afternoon and hello, friends. All good to be able to keep in touch this way. Hope that you're all keeping safe and healthy at this time. I think one point to add to what Sen had just mentioned is that from our frequent trips to customs just before the pandemic hit, seriously, the customs was already talking about like going enhancing or going doing more audits, and then the pandemic hit. So I think they've already got that program in place and stuff, and this may be used to be revived right after when things get better. Now, in terms of this program, customs are calling this the VA program in short. It's got covers two parts. One part is, of course, the voluntary disclosure, and the other one, they call it the Amnesty. The Amnesty Program covers instances where an audit has been conducted or a file open, and then you can participate in the amnesty instead of the voluntary disclosure. Now, next slide, please. In terms of why the need for the VA program, the customs have been encouraging self-compliance for some years now. The encouragement has been stronger. They're getting stronger and stronger to say, they want to encourage what they call self-compliance, right? But there's always been we don't have this formal voluntary disclosure framework, unlike the income tax regime. Yeah. So if, let's say, we were to make a business was to make a voluntary disclosure, it would be evaluated based on the merits. Yeah. So how much concession or any penalty waiver and all this level of like incentive given is all on a case-by-case basis, and of course, naturally, there's a lack of certainty in this, and it has led to a general reluctance of businesses to come forward when they discover any errors. I must say that from our own experiences, though, in those cases where clients have found errors and want to make good, and with the proper disclosure strategy and speaking to the right people at customs, customs have generally been quite reasonable in their approach in assessing voluntary disclosure. Yeah, so I think that must be said to the credit of customs. But still, without that formal framework, many businesses have taken the position to wait and see, yeah, instead of coming forward when they discover some errors. Now, so the VA program was announced last budget. Now, we see this as a case of the customs thinking that rather than increasing revenue by increasing audit activities during this pandemic time, the customs or government seem to be taking a softer approach to raise the revenue with this difficult time and businesses are suffering. So thus this program. The RMCD stated objectives for the VA program are as follows: to encourage taxpayers to voluntarily disclose unpaid taxes and duties, encourage full settlement of outstanding duties and tax by offering incentives, and of course increase revenue collection for the government. For the non-Malaysians listening in, in Malaysia sometimes we have this, from time to time, police, or Royal Malaysian Police sometimes give this incentive period where there are periods whereby if they set up counters over the shopping malls where if you pay your what they call it, your speeding fine and stuff, you get a discount as well. So it's similar to that kind of approach, I think. And then in the police case, it seems that it's been successful. I suppose it's been replicated by customs as well. Next slide, please. Now, some key commitments by the RMCD on the VA program. I thought this is important to verbalize. Now, customers have said, emphasize that this would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That's their words, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now, while this could be some, like a marketing terminology, but I suppose, we should take advantage of this program rather than hoping for any like future opportunities like this. And of course, I think more importantly, to avoid harsh treatments or strict interpretations when the audit starts, like Sensei, after this voluntary VA program expires. Okay. Now, I think suffice to say that through this time, that customs have put in a lot of effort into this. I know that this development of this program, there was a lot. We understand that there was a lot of internal convincing that they've had to do among the customs within customs themselves in terms of how generous they want to be in terms of the incentives. What kind of what do you call it, various things that facilities they want to be doing, and they're also thinking about a lot of what do you call it, road shows and promotion for this, right? And on top of that, they had to convince other stakeholders as well, which we understood what was a challenge, and this includes with MOF as well. So a lot of effort has been put into this program, and customs really do want to see this scheme successful. The next point is this, that customs have said that they will accept voluntary disclosures made in good faith. Now, what does this mean, in good faith? What we will observe is that if you were to make a disclosure, it's done through a system. Larry will go through the steps. But in the system, all you have to declare is the amount of the disclosure, and basically, and also if it involves your past returns, sales or service tax returns, you need to indicate which return it affects. There will not be a need, generally speaking, to submit any supporting documents. And customs in their guidelines say that they will accept that in good faith, in the sense that they will not be doing a full verification. They may do some minimal verification. That's all. Now, having said that, so that's what customs. If you've got colleagues in Malaysia who've gone to listen to customs talk and all those things, you will hear them saying that, saying that don't worry, we won't check, you just submit, we'll just take it in good faith. But underlying that, we are certain when we speak to them, is that the expectation is that we should have in place the full details and supporting documents in terms of the workings in case the customs request for checks. And this is in terms of the quantum of the disclosure and also the nature of the errors being made. I think this is and it's a good reminder, a timely reminder for ourselves, is that even in the era of GST, they started out in good faith, right? Saying that we will allow a lot of these concessions, but the moment they find some fraud or someone taking advantage, then everything clamped down. So important is, whilst customs is saying they'll take in good faith, there's not much checking and stuff, but we advise businesses to, if you do a disclosure, to have the proper backing ready in case of checking. Next point is that they say, customers have said that audits will not be conducted for the nature of the error that for the period and the period which has been covered in the disclosure. So if you declare an error, a particular error, and for a particular period, those periods, if the customs comes after the VA program, those will not be reopened for audits. But of course, what that means is that they can still come to audit, but they will audit in the other years which we have not, or periods which we have not disclosed for the same error, or they may audit other areas for the company. What we understand is that their intention, customs intention, is that with this period, generally speaking, they will not be conducting detailed audits for this period or this year. Okay. Now, the audits will commence from after the period, and this is to cover the for periods after 31st October 2021. Now, what they've also said, so of course some people may have raised this. They say, we are still seeing customs coming and doing audits on us, right? So that's from the perspective of the business. But what we understand from customs, this is what they call desk audits. That means they might initiate they come to you, initiate some like desk audits. In a sense, they might ask for some basic questions, do some sampling check, and if they find something, unlike usual audits, if they find something, then they will ask you for all the documents, and they will then compute the total of tax that you have to pay. In this case, if they find an error, they will just say, "Oh, okay, can you please, participate in the VA program and do your own disclosure?" Yeah. So that is what we understand the instruction to be, or the policy to be, and that has been pretty consistent in what we have observed so far. Yeah. I think a little point to mention here, Larry may be repeating the same point, but I thought it's important enough to mention this point, is that whilst the policy is, of course, the general customs policies, the people who will be conducting these audits, and of course, when you do a disclosure, you're actually doing it not to the customs headquarters, but doing this with your local customs stations. So we anticipate, like a lot of things in dealing with customs, that they may be, and we have started seeing some inconsistencies in interpretation of some practices. So just a point to note that if you do something, best to get advice and then have a proper strategy when you do this disclosure. The other point is that they say incentives will only be offered to disclosure made during the program. So this is something that they can't emphasize enough. This special deal is just for this period only, and it will not be extended. That's what they've said repeatedly. Yeah, and the other point they've mentioned is that any incentives will be cancelled, and duties and tax will come in reclaimed if there's any elements of fraud that they find. Okay. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, like I mentioned, customers have put in a lot of effort, and they're still putting a lot of efforts to ensure success of this program. Now, one of the things that they are doing is that they're getting their officers to also start writing to businesses, companies, either if you're a licensee or even companies or businesses which have been identified as audit targets. Yeah, and so the first polling question we're going to find out is that have you or your company been contacted or received any written notification by customs to invite you to participate in the VA program? Yeah, whether yes, no, or unsure. Now, unsure will be dangerous because from my experience, if you have this invite, there is a 21-day deadline to respond. So as I invite your participants to fill this question, maybe I'll ask Larry. Larry, you understand that we've got some clients who have received calls or letters like this. Can you share some experience?
Yep. So generally, there's a range, right? I've had a couple of clients who actually have ongoing audits. So if you have an ongoing audit, customs officers, I'm inviting you to participate in this. You need to submit this form. If you agree, I will stop work. I'll step back and I will wait for you to go through the disclosure process. If you say no, I don't want to participate, then I'm coming back in and I'm going to continue my audit. All right. I've also had clients who have never heard from customs but have suddenly got either a phone call or a letter to say that I'm inviting you to participate. So in those cases where this is the first you've heard from customs, at least you know now that you are on customs audit target list. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So what we are seeing is, okay, some, about 15% have gotten notification. Half no, some not sure. Yeah, okay.
So there still seems to be a large portion who have not received any notification. As Eng Yu mentioned, I think that not aware or unsure, that's the one that you need to go and pay attention, because as I think I'll highlight later about, there's a deadline to respond, and there could be some implications on that deadline. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, and it also I think Larry, that was discussed in, like when I was talking to our colleagues in the other states, it could be a timing issue, because different what we've observed is some states action have started, whereas for some looks as if maybe this is just post, maybe today's Cap Gomeh for the so maybe after Cap Gomeh the thing will come a bit more active. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for answering the question. I think now I'm going to pass the time to Larry to talk about the key features of the DA program. Over to you, Larry.
Thank you, Eng Yu. All right, so that's an overview of the general principles of the program. Let's go into a bit of details. Yeah. So, like Eng Yu mentioned, this VA program actually comprises two parts. The V is for the Voluntary Disclosure Program, and the A is for the Amnesty Program. The voluntary disclosure, as the name suggests, is the program to encourage taxpayers to come forward voluntarily and to disclose and pay for past non-compliance or errors in indirect taxes. Okay, so it's meant to cover errors or non-compliance that are not known or not yet discovered by customs. All right, so it's known only to you. The other part of the program is the Amnesty Program. Now, the difference with this is that it covers cases where customs have already discovered errors, or customs are aware that the taxpayer has non-compliance issues and there are unpaid taxes. So this would even be cases where customs have already issued a bill of demand, or a bill of demand is about to be issued. Okay. There will be a cutoff date for both programs, in that it only relates to duties or taxes payable before 31st October 2021. Just to mention, there's no new legislation that has been passed to enable these programs. They work within the current powers available to Customs and to the Minister of Finance. It is an administrative policy, and so details of the framework are put into a guide, and this guide is available on the Customs portal. All right, the link is on the screen. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the taxes included in this program? It is basically all taxes that are administered by customs. I think it excludes only a windfall levy on palm oil. So in terms of indirect taxes, it goes all the way back to the original sales tax and service tax, or SST 1.0 as we refer to it. It then covers the GST that came into place and replaced those taxes, and of course, the current sales tax and service tax that replaced GST in 2015. 28 duties on import and export declarations, and excise duties on imports or manufacturing. It also includes some lesser known taxes which are administered by customs, which are the tourism tax and the departure levy on airports. All right. So the key point to note, however, is that there is a cutoff date. Okay, so the only taxes you're eligible to disclose here are those taxes that have arisen or arise before 31st October 2021. It excludes all taxes or any liabilities arising which are already been investigated or under investigation by customs. Okay. So the thing to remember here is that any more recent exposures, you basically will not be eligible for this program. All right. Next slide, please. Okay, so the key benefit and the key pulling factor for participation in the program are the incentives that they're offering. The main incentive is a blanket remission of penalties payable, right? And penalties can be quite substantial. For sales tax and service tax, for example, it is up to 40% of unpaid taxes. Under existing legislation, the Director General of Customs can grant a remission of all or part of penalties but as Eng Yu mentioned earlier, it only happens on a case-by-case and a purely discretionary basis so far. Okay. The second part of the incentive is actually a partial remission or maybe a discount on the taxes itself. Okay, so this is actually quite new, unprecedented maybe, because the previous disclosure programs that they have for income tax, for example, only gives you remission on penalties, right? Yeah, so if anything, it does show that the authorities are really keen to push this program forward and to bring everyone up in terms of indirect taxes. So now in terms of the incentives on offer, the program will be run over 2 phases. All right, the first phase is 6 months from January to June 2022. For this first 6 months, they will offer a 100% remission of penalties and a 10 to 30% remission of taxes. For the subsequent 3 months in phase 2, which will be up to 30th September 2022, the incentives are basically halved in that there's a 50% remission on penalties and a 5 to 15% remission on taxes. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so let's look at how the program will kick off for most of you. So like I said, firstly, actually all companies are eligible to participate. If you know that you have indirect tax issues, you should be eligible to participate. But customs themselves are targeting specific companies. So they themselves are approaching specific companies. Okay, so if you have never been audited by customs before and you've been notified, that means you are on the Customs 2022 audit program list. Okay, so each customs station, each state has a list, and they will be targeting all companies on this list. Right, as Eng Yu mentioned, certain states may have started earlier. If you haven't heard, some states may be coming soon. Second is companies where audits are already in progress. Like I mentioned, a couple of clients, audits in progress, customs just stop and say, okay, do you want to participate or not? All right. Now, these programs, these audits may have, to be eligible, you must not have received any letter of findings or notification of findings or bills of demand, all right? And even if your audits have been completed in the past, you'd still be eligible for items that were not previously covered, all right? But so for all these companies, you should be expecting, or if you get a letter from customs, all right, or in some cases we even aware of phone calls, customs will contact you and basically give you this invitation to participate in this program. If you agree, all right, the audit, they won't proceed with the audits, and they will let you work out your voluntary disclosure. All right. If you don't agree, or worst case, if you fail if you didn't realize that you got the letter and you didn't respond, then they will take it as you don't want to participate, and they will come in for their audits. Okay. So this RSVP date of customs invitation is pretty important. So that's why please be on the lookout for these letters or calls, or whether any of your personnel have received such contacts from customs. Okay, so this notification, it's a form called a Lampiran 16 or Appendix 16. All you have to say at this point is, I agree or don't agree to participate. You don't disclose values. You don't disclose what is it that you're going to, how much you want to disclose. It's just to tell customs that, yes, I want to participate. So customs will then step back from the audits and wait for your disclosure. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, let's do a quick overview of the program. So now you've made the decision to participate, or you've responded to customs that you want to participate. This is a quick overview of what is supposed to happen. All right, so customs have set up a portal, an online portal, to manage the whole program. So as with portals, the first thing you have to do is sign up for a user ID on this MyVA system. Okay. The user ID is just some basic company information which you should need to provide. Then you do your assessments, or if you already know what you want to disclose, the second step is then I actually submit my online application in the form called the VA01. Now, at this point in time, this is where you disclose the actual numbers, the actual liabilities that you are disclosing. Okay. Then customs will issue you a letter of confirmation in the form VA02, and this letter will basically tell you, okay, I accept your disclosure. This is the amount of taxes and compound fine that you need to pay. All right. Customs have said that this VA02 should come out within 3 days of you submitting. So really, you see that there wouldn't be really much time to do any verifications. They do say that they may do some quick internal verifications or ask questions, but again, no supporting documents need to be submitted. Customs will not audit those supporting documents. It's supposed to be accepted in good faith, and they will issue you the letter for you to pay. You then make full payment within the prescribed timelines, upload proof of that payment, and at the end, they give you the certificate of approval, which is the VA03, to tell you that, okay, thank you, you have successfully completed and paid all taxes due under this program. Okay, looks pretty straightforward when you put it in a diagram like this, but the critical points I think to note here is that Customs said they will accept the disclosures in good faith. Okay, so meaning that you have made full disclosures of the errors of that transaction. All right. And based on that good faith, Customs will not conduct any audits, not at this time or in the future, on that particular transaction for the periods that you have disclosed. All right. But of course, there is always that underlying caveat to say that if at any point Customs believe that the transactions you have disclosed actually have elements of fraud or are fraudulent, then they have a right to withdraw any incentives given, take back any, impose whatever penalties, taxes, and fines that should have been paid. Okay, so of course, while like I said, while the process itself looks fairly simple, and credit to Customs, they've kept it a simple process, the devil will be in the details of what you assess and what you disclose to Customs. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so as I said, remember that there's a range of taxes. So looking at the eligibility and the incentives, for me, the first question is, am I eligible to participate, and what incentives would I be eligible for? You would need to refer to the Customs guide. Okay, in that guide, there is an Appendix 1, there's a table, and basically that table sets out various scenarios of non-compliance and potential exposures, and it will tell you the corresponding incentive that you would be eligible for. Okay, so an extract of that table, but can go to the next slide, please. I've attempted to just summarize quickly what are the exposures here. So the general tax remission incentive is a 10% remission in phase 1, which reduces to 5% in phase 2. So this covers all your general types of errors, right? So your under-declaration, underpayment of taxes, even where I've imposed and collected taxes, but I didn't actually remit the money to Customs, fail to account for GST or service tax on imported services. This is a popular one. Customs have found a lot of errors on this. Where I claim exemption facilities, a lot of these facilities I don't need terms, or so I may not have met some of those conditions where an approval is given. Okay, and in terms of underpayment or under declaration of duty and tax during import and export of goods. All right, so those is a long list of general errors and 10% remission. Now, the highest range is 30% tax remission. There are a couple of cases here where you would be eligible for that. The first one is where a company never registered, never collected taxes, and of course, never paid anything to Customs. So this appears to be a case where Customs is offering a high incentive here to encourage these people to come up and disclose and say, yep, I never collected tax for the last 4 years, but Customs attempting to bring them into the tax net. Okay. Then incentives specifically on motor vehicles. General, this is relating to for example, the 30% one is where for imported CBU vehicles, CBU being completely built up vehicles, if they're stored in a bonded warehouse without payment of tax, I need to count for tax after 48 months. All right. And then similarly, there's a 20% incentive also for use for vehicles in other cases, giving you a pretty high incentive. So this basically just shows you that this is an area that customs is really focusing on, right, in terms of motor vehicles. Motor vehicles duties and taxes are pretty high in Malaysia. And to the extent that customs have also said that, look, if you don't disclose, they're going to start seizing vehicles after this. All right. And in all cases, of course, in terms of the penalty remission, it is standard across phase 1 to be 100% remission, and phase 2 a 50% remission. And just to add at this point, customs will also be imposing a minimum compounded fine for each disclosure made. Okay, next slide, please. So this leads into this next slide, and I just want to highlight this point in terms of the payment of tax. Okay, so what customs is saying, they're making it very clear that in order to enjoy the incentives, not only must you make the disclosure, but you must make full payment of the taxes. All right, so you can't just make the disclosure and then walk away and decide to pay at some point later. In fact, customs have gone to the extent to say that full payment must be made within the phase that the disclosure is made. All right, so for example, to enjoy the full phase 1 incentives, not only must the application be submitted in phase 1, full payment must also be made in phase 1. If, for example, you submit the application in phase 1, but you only make the payment in phase 2, then you're only going to get the phase 2 incentives. All right. And similarly for phase A, the taxes in phase 2 itself. If you fail to pay the taxes in full after 30th September, when the whole program ends, you will not get any incentives at all. Okay. So, and as mentioned, customs will impose a minimum compound. What they're saying is if the liability is less than 100,000 ringgit that you're disclosing, there will be a 500 ringgit compound per application. If the liability is more than 100,000, there will be a 1,000 ringgit compound per application. Right, and just to be clear, full payment here to enjoy the incentives means the payment of tax after the remission, payment of penalty after remission, plus any compound. All right, so all three components must be paid and settled in full time to get your incentives. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the next one. So that covers basically the voluntary disclosure part of the VA program. Quickly on the Amnesty Program. So like I mentioned, the Amnesty Program is where you have already, customs have already come in and hit you with findings, and they've already issued you with a bill of demand, right? A BOD for unpaid taxes or duties. Okay, so the conditions, the categories or the conditions for when you're allowed to participate in this is that basically it will apply to any person who has been issued with a BOD covering a period up to 31st October 2021. Okay, and they still have tax areas of taxes unpaid. All right, sometimes when you issue a BOD, you may not pay upfront. You may be paying it in installments, or maybe you have not even paid the demand yet. All right, so it will only apply to unpaid taxes at 31st October. Customs say the incentive will be calculated based on the outstanding balance of the bill of demand payable on the date the application is received. They've also highlighted a few situations where they say that, okay, look, if the bill of demand is included in an exhibit in an ongoing civil suit that is pending court judgment, they're still eligible to participate in the program. But any bill of demand that has been registered in court and has already obtained the judgment, you're not eligible for the program anymore. If it relates to a case that is pending at the customs tribunal, you will only be eligible if the customs tribunal case is withdrawn. All right, so yeah, so this is incentive if you like to try and settle all these cases and make payments, and the incentive is a flat 10%, right? And penalty remissions are the same, of 100% in phase 1 and 50% in phase 2. Okay, so that is basically all I have, and I'll highlight all what I think are the important points to note at this point on the two programs. Before we move on, I think we can move to the next slide. Okay, so like you said, earlier on we saw that there's still a lot of companies that either haven't got any notification or are unsure if they got any notification. So the question now is, whether or not you've received notification, are you already aware of any indirect tax non-compliance in your company? And specifically in the amount of any indirect tax exposures arising from those non-compliance events, right? So the answers are, yes, I am aware of non-compliance in my company. I'm probably thinking what to do about it. No, as far as I'm concerned, I'm comfortable that I'm fully compliant with indirect taxes, or I'm really not sure whether or not I am in compliance. Okay. Can you maybe, while waiting, you share some experiences you have with your clients in basically dealing with this question?
Yeah, I think what we observe, Larry, is reflective of the categories of this thing. It's a reflection in the sense that what you've mentioned just now, we've got, of course, at the moment, clients who are already in the midst of an audit. So in that case, of course, either it's known or soon to be known, or it's being disputed. That's one area, right? Then, of course, we also have the other category of our clients who, in the course of the business, we have done health checks and stuff, and there's some findings, and this is where for those clients we are taking steps to organize for this disclosure, right? But of course, the next category are the people who are in a sense not sure, or have not done their own review, recent review, right? And of course, then it's not so sure. But I think one point to highlight is that what we observe is this, that usually the general tendency, I suppose naturally also because everybody's got other work to do, is just to say there's we haven't been contacted, so we do nothing. But the moment the call comes, then everything seems to get accelerated. We can talk about it later as well.
Yeah.
Because I said, when we get the call, then since the question starts to what do we do? What's the implication?
Yeah, that's right. If you have not been contacted, you could technically take some time, but once you receive the letter and you don't even know whether you have any compliance issues, technically you have like 21 days to decide whether or not you have issues, right? Yeah. So looking at the answers here, it's good. There's about 12% who are actually aware that they have non-compliance issues. So I trust at least you should have a plan or a strategy to look at it. There's a good percentage that are quite comfortable with their position that they have no indirect tax issues. And unfortunately, more than 51% here are basically saying, well, actually, I'm not sure, right? So if you have not been contacted by customs, it's a good point to start thinking about what to do next. Or if you already have been contacted, then a very urgent plan of action needs to be put in place, right? Okay, so thanks. That's my section on the overview of the program, and just handing over to you, Eng, on what to be done next.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. So for the next part here, we'll just highlight some of the
We've lost
the risk.
audio on you, I think.
Larry, can you hear me? Hello, Larry, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, good now. Now you're good. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So these are some of the common indirect tax non-compliance areas, and customs in some of their talks as well have also highlighted this to businesses. I mean, these are the areas which they have often found exposures or findings. Yeah. Now let's start with the first one, service tax here. Now, just as a background, the service tax, providers of certain prescribed taxable services have to, of course, register and then charge the tax and then remit the tax to customs. Now, the ongoing issues with service tax is that what constitutes a taxable service is not always clear cut, and that's because of the description of what is a taxable service. Yeah, with categories like IT service, digital service, management service, consultancy services. That, you know, those words itself, there's always, you know, where do you draw the boundary? What is, you know, what fits, what doesn't fit, come under the ambit? It's always been grey. And this is, and to top that off, the guidance in respect of this changes from time to time. Yeah, some recent changes that took place, for example, which, you know, up to now there's a lot of disagreement, but still the customers have been persistent, taking the position, for example, that certain scheduled or preventive maintenance is viewed as a taxable management service. Yeah, and of course, if you have been following, then you might have missed it, because due to our insistence, the guide was changed and that service was included. But before that, you know, of course, if you looked at the guide before, it was silent. Yeah, so the guides keep changing, and also there were some flip-flop decisions involving some property management as well. Yeah, so that's the first thing about, you know, the service if you're providing a service, whether it's taxable or not. And to top that off, the law has been changed as well for service tax, whereby if you imported taxable services which are taxable, if you procure from a local provider, meaning to say if you pay the foreign service provider, you would have to self-account for service tax, just like what you do in GST, but only difference that there's no credit mechanism. Yeah, and this is another very common area where there's non-compliance. Yeah. And up to now, we are still hearing clients saying, "Oh, but I paid withholding tax," but that's a different thing. Yeah? So this is service tax on imported taxable services. Okay. Now, next one is that for local and foreign service providers involved in digital services, now that you know, we know that this service tax has covered this since 1st January 2020, and during that time, when this was introduced, there was some, you know, of course, confusion and stuff, and because of that, you know, there were a lot of people who were registered late. Yeah, so this is another late registration for under the digital services is another area. Next one comes sales tax. For sales tax, a manufacturer of taxable goods, yeah, sales tax is generally 10%, and service tax is 6%. Yeah, so if you're manufacturing taxable goods, you're supposed to again register, charge, and remit the tax to customs. Now the thing is this: the definition, there's a special definition of the word manufacture in the Sales Tax Act, and it's very wide. Basically says something to the effect that, you know, any transformation into a new product by either change in nature, quality, size, and all sorts of things means manufacture, right? So you know, imagine change in nature, size, and quality can be manufacturing. So we observe from time to time that there are people, clients and businesses who are involved in trading. Yeah, they say trading, but in their trading activity, they also provide like value-added services, including sometimes, you know, some minor assembly or fabrication. In those cases, quite clearly for sales tax, it is manufacturing activity, but somehow, you know, over the years, this is one of those areas whereby we have highlighted, but, you know, it continues to persist. Yeah, so all this minor assembly, fabrication, and stuff like that, that is subject to sales tax. Now, the next one is another very, very common and unfortunate area of exposure, and it relates to facilities and concessions from customs. Now, in the you know, of course, any concession or facility or exemption from customs will come with conditions. Yeah. So in the past, businesses will apply, customers will process whether you got things correct, then they will approve. They send you an approval by letter, and the conditions are at the back. Yeah. But now, you know, with of course what do you call that? Businesses, you know, are asking customers to be more efficient, and for the sake of efficiency, and again, using that in good faith issue, a lot of applications are done online, and many approvals are given on the spot. Yeah, it's auto-approved. Now, what we have unfortunately observed is that because of that, there seems to be a bit more carelessness on the part of businesses. We are seeing, you know, application for wrong facilities, yeah, and also not paying attention to the conditions attached to the what do you call that, the facilities, which have led to, you know, low-hanging fruit for customers to come and fine non-compliance. And this include, for example, sales tax exemption facilities on your purchases of inputs, raw materials, and components. There's also service tax. There's a B2B exemption, an application of other concession notices. Now, for the B2B exemptions, it is the claimant who need to make sure that you comply. So that means that if you are receiving services, and if your provider has not charged you tax, you need to be sure that you qualify for the exemption because you are the one who's deemed to be claiming it. There are other areas like claiming for intra-group tax exemption. In this case, because you don't have to apply, you just take a position. Also, facilities involving exports of goods and services where you don't pay sales or service tax. To make sure that you fulfill all those conditions. Other facilities like licensed manufacturing warehouse, AEO, and all those things, they have all got conditions. Next slide, please. Okay, here are some of the other ones. I just want to highlight one other point, a couple of other points. That what Sam said just now, GST is still in play, so the GST audit is still ongoing, all the GST issues still there. And one of the other new areas involve the area of transfer price adjustments. That is an area as well. If you have transfer price adjustments, customs may look at it and say, whether or not that adjustments relate to the price of goods imported or not, if you have. I think those are some of the common areas of error. I'll pass the time to Sam to do a summing up and next steps. Over to you, Sam.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, if we just go to the next slide. So how do you go about preparing for this VA program? So there's a few steps. So one, if you're aware that you have areas of non-compliance, I think now certainly the time to act. You need to take steps to understand what those areas are to try and quantify and determine the value of that. If you're not sure or you've not really looked into how effective your indirect tax processes have been, what we're seeing many businesses do and what we've recommended is that they either conduct a self-review or they get someone to come in and do an independent review, aka a health check on their current operations to determine what areas of non-compliance might be. So once you've done that review, then you're in a much better position to sort of respond to customs around whether you can participate in this voluntary disclosure program or not. And so that again means that you have to really have a strategy around how you engage with them, and how you respond to those that letter given at the 21-day time frame. So it's really about taking proactive action right now, so that you're putting yourself in a better position when customs reach out to you. Now, although there's only limited time frame, some of the areas that you can do. So if you're uncertain, it's important that you seek out customs and get some certainty around some of the technical positions. Because once that disclosure period ends, or once the audit starts, it'll be too late at that point. So once you sort of done that health check, or you looked at some of the technical positions, identified areas of errors, at that point, then you can really look at what the potential value of any exposure might be, and then assessing whether you participate in this scheme or not. Now, that sort of comes to the end of the presentation. Now, before we head into the Q&A, I just wanted to thank Larry and Engu for the presentation. Now, we have some questions that are already submitted, so I'm just going to go through those questions in the next few minutes. Firstly, we've had a question around, is there a timeline or a period for the VA program? We did touch on this earlier, but I'll repeat that. So essentially, we've got two time frames. So the first period starts on January and ends in June, and that's the period that has the larger incentives, including full waiver of penalties and up to 30% of tax. Then you have a shorter period from July till the end of September, which has a partial remission of penalties and a much lower rate of tax. The important thing is that these timeframes assume that payment of the tax will be made by the end of that period. So if you don't make payment by the end of June, and it happens, say, in July, then the incentive period that will apply would be the second period of 3 months, and you won't get all of the benefits. So it's important that everything is closed and paid for within that period. We have some questions which I'll post to Larry. What happens if I elect to participate in the program but then change my mind later? Or alternatively, what if I elect not to participate at all, but subsequently, through my help checks or internal reviews, I find that I've got indirect tax issues and want to participate? Have I lost my chance? What would you like to say about that, Harry?
Okay. Unfortunately, the first part of it I'm going to say is that answers have been a bit inconsistent coming from customs, right? If you recall, different customs stations, they may interpret differently. But generally, on the first part of the question, the guide itself states that you can withdraw from the program at any point in time if you've elected, but before the form VA02 is issued by customs. If you remember, the VA02 is where customs issued a confirmation to say, yep, I accept your disclosure, this is how much tax you have to pay. All right. So you can withdraw at any point in time. Before then, there must be a written application submitted to customs station where the application is made. Yep, so technically you can even withdraw like after you actually made the submission of the VA01 application form, but of course if customs say they're going to reply in 3 days, that's not really it's a very small window there for you to withdraw. Realistically, you would withdraw even before you make the actual submission. On the second part of the question, if I've indicated I don't want to participate and then later I say, hey, actually I found a mistake, I want to participate now, this part is maybe not so clear. We may have got some inconsistent answers, but generally, I would say that yes. See, what happens is if the minute you say no, technically, they commence their audits, all right? So if an audit is already in progress, then they could just continue the audit. But if your audit has not started, then they could say, all right, I'll give you a chance and let you participate now, all right? So again, because it's managed by different state teams, I would say that advisable to engage directly with those customs teams to make sure that your plans and strategies are clear to them. Yep.
Yeah. So I think we have a related question to that as well, which is what does this actual letter look like? The letter that customs sort of sends to taxpayers. Is there anything we can share around the contents as to what the letter actually said?
The content itself, this is the letter.
Yeah, sorry.
You want to take that? Sorry, yeah.
No, it's good. Wait first.
Sorry, I didn't hear. You want me to take that?
Yeah. Wait. Or maybe let me start first. I think I'll start because I had the first-hand experience with all these calls from customs, right? Like this is the thing about that you're not sure whether you've been contacted. So I'm not sure why, but customs contacted me, even though I'm not the designated person for any of the Deloitte entities. So I got a call, and the officer said, look, are you this Deloitte particular entity? I said yes. I said, so I'll be having, customs said, I'll be having this disclosure program. And so first of all, the call came. There was a call first. And the letter followed. And I think one thing that I would like to emphasize as the person who reported the call is that the customs officer just, I think, said this, that if when we send this form, you have to respond within 21 days. And if you say yes, you want to participate, you tick yes, then it'll take like what they say the process will take a few days. You submit the form, then they'll give you a what they call it, a form to fill to say how much you want to submit. But answering yes means that you want to participate, and there will be an amount to disclose. And that if you say no, you don't want to participate, then immediately they will say, provide me this information, I will commence audit. Yeah. And after that call, the letter came, and the letter basically reflect that what do you call that? What the discussion? Then I think you have the sample letter with you, but I think it's just about that to
yeah.
Not much details.
Correct. At that first stage, the first stage is basic. Yeah. The first stage is basically to indicate yes or no. Yeah. But the what goes behind that decision is, I mean, you can believe you're compliant, but so it's a matter of your comfort and level of comfort in your business to know that you're compliant to say no. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Larry. And you. Given that we're right on the hour, I think unfortunately that's all the time that we have. Thank you, and special thanks to all who were able to join us. We'd like to encourage you to fill out the short survey that will pop up on your screen momentarily and tell us what you think about today's program. If you joined us late, please note that this presentation will be archived for future viewing. If you feel that others would benefit from this webcast, please share the webcast via the share this icon or have them visit the Debrief's website. We will respond to all the questions submitted during the webcast in a couple of weeks. Also, if you think you have any other questions or comments later, feel free to reach out to us, either myself or the other speakers. We'd be more than happy to talk to you. Also, please do not forget to tune in to our next scheduled webcast from the Global Mobility, Talent and Rewards on the 22nd of February, titled Reward in the Future of Work, Operating an Equity Plan. At last, from all of us at Deloitte, thank you for your participation in Deloitte's Asia Pacific Tax webcast today. Goodbye.
Thank you.